Oh, okay. So sorry. It's LinkedIn. Why is it not live? Sorry. Oh, okay. We're live. Perfect. Hi, Tikue. Welcome to Venture with Grace today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Grace.
First of all, congratulations on the new rounds of funding last week.
Thank you.
Okay, so to give the audience a little bit of your background, so let's talk about the product first. I feel like the product is it's like a really extremely useful product. Why don't we start with you talk about the product and then we can walk through like your background before founding Kudos.
Yeah, so Kudos is an AI-powered wallet that helps our members earn more from every dollar that they spend. Some people say that Kudos is what you would get if like Google Pay, Credit Karma, and Honey had a genius baby. So it's like a
Mhm.
very intelligent wallet that helps you pay automatically and autofill the best card at checkout. We deliver personalized rewards across our 15,000 merchant partners, and we give you personalized financial like advice with like we have an AI chatbot called MariaGPT that you can ask any question about like credit cards or like in future about personal finance. We give personalized insights in our app and in our hub, like just in things that you can do or change in your spend behavior to unlock more earnings and savings. So that's like in a nutshell, Kudos just helps you earn more. My background is before Kudos, I was a product lead for Google Pay on web. I helped launch and lead the launch of Google Pay's launch on web, scale that to hundreds of thousands of merchants, and built out our first partnership with Shopify, expanded Google Pay into Asia Pacific. And then after Google Pay, I went to Affirm, where I helped launch Affirm on Amazon and also helped set some of the foundations for Affirm's expansion internationally. And my co-founder and I have actually worked at all the same companies for the last like 8, 9 years. So we met each other back at like this Microsoft Media Room team, and then we worked at Google and we worked at Affirm. And he was a lot more focused on building out tools to help merchants acquire customers in an efficient and personalized way. So Kudos was really a combination of both our interest in that I cared about building personalized finance experiences for consumers, and Ahmad like had a lot of insights in like how that translated into value for retailers.
Mm. I wonder, I guess like when first of all, like I thought like also I browsed the deck. I feel like you guys have some amazing investors as well. So why don't we talk about like I think number one is like what was a unique insight that you guys earned before starting the company? And can we talk about from like the general finance landscape where like the fintech ecosystem is going and then why this would be like a strong player down the line, like first of all what's your like thinking framework there and then we can talk about like other part of the business.
Got it. So I will start with like I'll break it into two parts. So like our
Mhm.
the insights that led to Kudos
Mhm.
and how Kudos ultimately plans to play in the fintech industry as evolves
Mhm.
over the next couple of
Mhm.
years. So the insights that led to Kudos, I would say there are two core insights. So one was from my experience like building consumer payment products. Something that I learned was when you build like I built a lot of integrated checkout products with Google and Affirm, and the thing I learned there was that a lot of the time you spend the majority of your mind space trying to figure out how to get more merchants to integrate with your wallet and less time on unlocking value for the consumer. So like at Google Pay, the big thing that we needed to do was how do we get more merchants to like support the Google Pay button? Something we did right off the bat with Kudos is that the checkout part of our product actually works through a browser extension, which means that it works automatically everywhere you shop. So we're not really solving the acceptance problem. We're now more focused on solving the consumer value problem, which most wallets don't prioritize today. And like, again, consumer value for us means how do we help you find more money with every dollar that you spend? How do we leverage insights that we have from you, from your shopping behavior to deliver value to you, which is something that, again, bringing in the second insight, as Amado was building advertising tools at Google and Affirm, the big insight there was that like merchant acquisition costs are going up because with a lot of the changes that are happening with things like IDFA, it is becoming a lot more difficult for merchants to deliver personalized experiences to consumers. And so something that Kudos does very uniquely is that because we're part of your shopping experience, because we understand a little bit more about like your shopping behavior and historical purchases, we're able to do things like say, hey, if you just shopped at Casper, if you were buying furniture, and we have within our 15,000 merchant partner group, like a furniture store or like a bedding store, we can actually work with that merchant to deliver personalized offers to you, the consumer. And we create this win-win-win dynamic where the consumer wins because they were going to purchase something and they just end up earning more. The merchant wins because they acquire a customer who was going to make a purchase, but maybe not on their site. And we also translate this into the way we think about things like our partnerships with the issuers, where today, the way people discover new credit cards is by reading blogs like The Points Guy, NerdWallet.
Mm-hmm.
And what we believe is that fundamentally, if we understand enough about you, the consumer, we understand your spend patterns, we are in a better position to say, hey, based on your credit score and your spend patterns, you should probably go get the Amex Gold because you spent a lot on dining, and over the last 12 months, you would have actually earned about $600 specifically looking at your spend, versus trying to have you parse through so much content to get to an answer. We believe in just giving people answers. And if you look at the trends that are happening in the macro environment with AI, consumers are moving from a place where they want, they're consuming many different links to where they just want answers. And so I think the future of finance is actually in giving people answers and insights that are very valuable to them. And so getting to the second part of your question, where does Kudos play in this whole realm, and what is the future of finance? I think a lot of the future, the way I think about the future of personal finance is, I think a lot of it really comes down to personalization. I think experiences will become a lot more catered specifically to the consumer, and consumers are going to start to care more about actually getting answers that take their information and deliver value to them. And that's where Kudos, where Kudos really plays in here, is that Kudos sits at this really interesting intersection of fintech and commerce. We have consumers as our first priority, but we also work with merchants and we work with card issuers, and basically connecting the whole ecosystem such that leveraging personalized data from the consumer, we're able to deliver value to the consumer, but we're also able to help merchants acquire new customers, and we're also able to let credit card issuers acquire new customers that are a good fit for them. So again, we're sitting at this really interesting intersection, and super excited about what's to come.
Totally. I thought one of the things I thought you guys did very impressively is you guys, number one, grow really fast. Number two, it's you guys have partnered with a lot of iconic brands like Sephora of the world. I wonder, as a startup, when you are trying to partner with building partnerships with bigger company, I wonder how does that happen internally? I guess, what's your thinking framework on number one, who to partner? For your case, I think it's very obvious, a lot of wherever people shop, right? So
Yeah.
I wonder, for that integration to happen with a bigger clients like a Sephora, how long would the integration cycle be? And then how would you, how does I guess the incentivizing structure play into the game? Maybe it will be helpful if we could just quickly walk through how the typical points ecosystem work, how does the money flow? So I know that when a credit card transaction happens, there is the merchant is essentially, so why don't we let you explain the situation? I feel I don't want to butcher the whole ecosystem. I watched some tutorials online before it came up, but I want to make sure that we cover it in the right way.
So I think you asked there are two questions there. So one is how do we partner with brands, and how do we what is that cycle for convincing brands to work with us? And I think the second is, how does the points ecosystem work, and how does Kudos play in the points ecosystem? Is that correct? So with the first side of things, one thing that you learn with working with retailers is that retailers care about driving, brands care about incrementality. So brands care about working with partners that can actually prove that they will get something incremental out of working with that partner. And something that is, again, very unique with Kudos is that we have a fast growing user base, a high FICO, high spend segment that cares a lot about earnings. So earnings actually influence the way they think about shopping. And when we work with a brand like Sephora, a lot of the core pitch is that Kudos has a specific demographic of spenders, and we are able to take dollars that Sephora gives us, and we're able to deliver that in a very personalized way to a consumer to incentivize a sale in a way that is a win for the consumer and a win for Sephora. Now, the balance there is that like we need to always prioritize the value that we deliver to the consumer and actually expose that value to the consumer. If you think about what has happened historically with, because this is a form of advertising that doesn't necessarily feel like advertising to the consumer. If you think about what has happened in the world of like the Googles and the Facebooks and like a lot of the concerns around privacy, the way those got triggered was consumers were basically the product for companies like Facebook, but they never really got that value exchange where it's like, hey, you're making money because Sephora is advertising with you, Facebook, but I don't really get anything out of this relationship. All I get is my data being used to personalize purchases. But what we do generally at Kudos is whenever we work with a brand and whenever we expose a brand's offer to a consumer, we always explain very clearly what that value exchange is. We show you very clearly that if you made a purchase at this brand, which we're recommending to you based on how you spend, you would actually unlock X dollars in terms of earnings from your credit cards, and you would also unlock X more dollars in earnings from the brand. So that's like the first part. And in terms of like what does an integration look like, it is way simpler than the type of integration that I had to do with brands when I worked with Google Pay and Affirm, because like when you're working on integrated checkout products, the cycles are months or even years because you actually need to get the brands to do technical work to put your button on their site. Now, the cool thing about the way we work is that we don't need to get brands to put our button in their site. The primary relationship that we build with the brands is a relationship that's driven around like driving incremental purchases. And so brands unlock spend and put that spend towards Kudos, and Kudos is able to like deliver that spend in a personalized way to our consumers. And those consumers end up purchasing and becoming loyal purchases for a brand. So that's like the brand side of things. And in terms of the second question, which is around like what is the points ecosystem and how does it work within the context of Kudos? So what Kudos does is Kudos is a wallet where like we have two products. One is a browser extension and another is the app with the personalized insights and all that. On the browser extension front, whenever you're making a purchase at any site, Kudos shows you exactly the best card to use to earn more rewards. Kudos will show you things like hidden benefits like purchase protection, extended warranty that are worth thousands of dollars to the consumer, but are usually so convoluted and complicated that most consumers actually don't understand or know that their cards have those benefits. And so those little things like knowing that you have trip protection when you're purchasing an airline ticket, or knowing that you have purchase protection when you're purchasing an expensive electronic, and seeing that you're also going to earn 10% back more really helps consumers feel a lot better about the purchases that they're making. And then additionally, on about 15,000 partner sites, we give what we call Kudos Boost, which is a match on your credit card reward. So if you were shopping at Sephora and you were shopping you were buying something for $100 and you were shopping with a card that was going to give you 3% back, plus extended warranty on that purchase, Kudos through our Sephora partnership would also give you an additional 3% back. So you end up earning 6% in that purchase. So a purchase that generally in aggregate felt like $100 purchase now feels like a $94 purchase, which matters a lot to the consumer, again, and just like making you feel better about like that you're making.
Totally. I wonder, like, when it comes to, I want to quickly say hi to the audience. Hi, LinkedIn user. I couldn't see your name, but like, we'll address your question at the end. So please stay tuned to the end. So I wonder when it comes to like, creating we talk about like on the partnership side of things, like how you like, partner with Sephora, and I wonder like, for since like a lot of the startup listeners will be listening to the show, I wonder for the suggestion on like, how to reach out to these like bigger brands. I wonder if you have any suggestion for people. Let's say if I'm building like a AI company that's, not necessarily in the fintech space, but let's say I'm building like an AI healthcare company. How should I partner with, like, I guess like a famous like health hospital or something? I guess like, can you walk us through the how you think about the sales cycle and the who exactly on the team you have to talk to make that happen? Do you leverage like the investor network, or do you leverage the existing connection when you built like back in time at Google? Like how do you think about like even partner with like a big brand in general?
Yeah, so there's not one single answer, but I would say,
Mhm.
like, if I was to break them into like three parts,
Yeah.
the first part is what you said, which is leveraging our existing network. So
Mhm.
we're very fortunate in that a lot of people at our team worked at iconic brands like Honey
Yeah.
that already worked with these brands. Like we
Mhm.
have a lot of investors that come from companies like PayPal, Google Pay. So like there are existing relationships that like we can leverage to figure out like how to partner with certain brands where existing relationships already exist within our investor base. And that is
Mhm.
probably the most straightforward set of types of partnerships.
Mhm.
And then within the space that we're in, which is like the like there are a lot of there are affiliate managers that actually manage the marketing budgets for many of these brands, and many of these folks go to conferences like the Rakuten Optimism conference that's happening next week, which I'm going to. And
Mhm.
that is usually also a very good place to meet a lot of people who manage marketing budgets for brands in one place. And like the reason I'm not really big on conferences in general, but I do prioritize these specific tactical conferences because you end up meeting about 20, 30 different brands, and like you can actually explain why they should partner with you. And then there's a third bucket, which is just like cold messaging, folks. And I think that's something that we've done with big brands and like mid-tier brands,
Mhm.
and with enough persistence, with enough clarity in terms of like what value you're
Mhm.
going to deliver to the brands, with enough social proof of like, here's why you should partner with us, because we've partnered with these other brands that are similar to you, and here are the kinds of results that we've seen. So brands care about things like average order increase in average order value. They care about increasing conversions. They care about incrementality in terms of like, do you have access to members who maybe will not make a purchase with my brand that will now make purchases because I'm integrated with Kudos, and they care about just like quality of audience and like repeatable behavior. And these are all things that within the Kudos package, we're able to like show and explain to brands. So the
Mhm.
clearer you are when you're making cold messages to like and explaining very clearly and succinctly what is the value prop that you deliver to the brand, the easier it is to like unlock these partnerships. So just breaking it down, it's like existing investor network, going to conferences that actually have a lot of like advertisers that manage brand dollars, and
Mhm.
good old cold email
Mhm.
with clear value propositions.
I want to quickly unpack a little bit on like the cold outreach. I feel like that's such a underrated skill. Like no matter where you are in life, I feel like the cold outreach is probably like one of the most important thing. I guess like as a CEO of the company, I guess who would you reach out to? Let's say of like a Sephora of the world. Like would it be like the chief like technology officer at the company, or like would it be like the chief revenue officer? I guess like how do you position yourself to be like a a really good value add for the company?
So I generally, with the cold messages, I actually generally try to find the exact person that is managing the budget that I'm
Okay.
trying to get access to. And so that's usually probably someone within the marketing team for that
Mm,
brand. And it's actually not that difficult to find that person usually, because if you like look enough, if you look deep enough at LinkedIn and like try to search with certain types of terms, you're going to start to get a sense of who might be the person that's actually managing the
mhm,
advertising dollars that brands dedicate to publishers like us. So
mm,
that's usually who I go direct to. And sometimes when you're going through that process, you find that maybe there are a bunch of mutual LinkedIn connections. And sometimes I'll reach out to those LinkedIn connections and say, how well do you know this person? And can you make an introduction? But I try to go very specifically. The thing with going like straight to the CMO is you're now kind of like putting layers, like especially for cold messaging, like you're putting layers between you and where the actual dollars are moving. Like usually when I'm going to like the higher level people within organizations, it tends to be more the internal personal network,
mm,
investor network, where like an investor is very close to the CMO of a brand like Sephora, and they're like, hey, this is like an innovative AI powered wallet I'm working with. You should consider working with them. And that actually gets a lot more taken a lot more seriously, because it's like the CMO might be like, hey, I like this person within my team is thinking about innovative ways to work with publishers. So I will connect you to that person. But usually with cold emails, I try to go exactly to the person that is going to make the decision and that is going to like dedicate the dollars.
mm. I wonder when you're thinking about like the marketing and distribution side, I think you guys did such an amazing job at like, the I assume like a lot of like it's like organic growth, right? So I wonder as a CEO, how would you think about like creating the distribution organically? Or, I know that like we briefly chat about like the YouTube, like basically like there's a lot of YouTuber talking about you guys. Like, guys, how do you get on the radar of the right people? Obviously, you guys have a lot of really amazing investors, such as like the Points
Mhm.
guy. I feel like that's a very relevant influencer in the space, obviously.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, how do you think about like the distribution? And I have like a piggyback crazy question, which is like, okay, so when you first started the company, how do you like think about like you were gonna one day arrive at like 100 million ARR one day, or like 500 million ARR? Do you have like a very clear plan on like how to go forward, or like what was your thinking framework on like becoming a unicorn?
Okay, there are two questions there too. So
Yeah.
the first is like how
One is distribution, one is like the
like
thinking
how
framework of like becoming a
like growth.
unicorn.
Yeah, how do we, yeah. So the first on distribution. So you mentioned investors, and the interesting thing that you learn when you build a B2C company is that
Mhm.
like in B2B, investors can easily help you unlock your first set of customers. In
Mhm.
B2C, you actually have to like fight to get your first set of customers, because we're talking about end users here, and like
Mhm.
investors can't necessarily unlock end users. So for us, it was kind of like a multi-step process for growth. The first 100 users, Ahmad and I literally talked to every single one of them and recruited them onto Kudos. Like that's where we had our alpha version of Kudos. And
Mhm.
then I would say with the next like 5,000 ish was leaning very manually into community. So I actually was going into like the credit cards, like /slash credit cards and Reddit, answering a lot of questions, like talking to folks about like credit cards, and occasionally plugging in how Kudos could help like unlock value for those like members. And so that was like the initial seeding was through very manual effort, with like talking to actual people that might care about our product, and like talking to communities. And then with the next phase, we started to think about like, okay, to go from like 5,000 to 100,000, we have to start to do things that either leverage people's existing networks, or like just create an overall like organic loop within the product. Now, to leverage people's existing networks, as I'm talking about, like whether it's like partnering with influencers or giving influencers an incentive to want to talk about you, we started manually working with some like YouTube influencers, and over the course of time, we just started to see additional types of influencers that we were not partnering with talking about Kudos. And then
Mhm.
on the other front, with like the user like loop, I think a lot of it really is about just building a product that people actually want to use and want to tell people about. And so fundamentally, I think this is still a thing that we internalize a lot today, where like to get people to want to share your product and to get your product to grow organically, the product needs to be good. It needs to not annoy people for the part. And so that's something that we strive to do. And we do obviously build in certain mechanisms that make it easier for people to further be incentivized to share Kudos. Like we have a referral program.
Mhm.
Like our referral program is tied to deeper funnel incentives. Like you will get X dollars if a person joins Kudos and makes a purchase, like makes a purchase at one of our partner sites. So like, but again, building a great product, putting the right incentive structure in place, and also leveraging existing networks of people like influencers that already have access to the audience that matters to you. Now, on the other question you asked, which is like, how do we think about the path to like 100 million ARR and unicorn when we started the company? The truth is, we it's not something that we necessarily actively think about, and it's not what every VC wants to hear. But the thing that we do think about is that if we build a great product that people want to use, and if we build it with a lens around like commercialization, monetization, so it's like build a product around delivering consumer value, delivering value to merchants, delivering value to credit card issuers, and create a win-win-win dynamic, there is a natural like monetization loop there. Like, so
Mhm.
with credit card issuers spend over $20 billion a year in customer acquisition, and Kudos delivers a more personalized way for them to acquire customers through our members based on their spend and their historical habits and their goals. Similarly with merchants spend about $40-50 billion in advertising spend to acquire customers. And if we're delivering the right value to the consumer in a very unique way,
Mhm.
merchants will allocate those dollars, and we're seeing those merchants starting to partner with us to allocate their dollars towards us. So again, I just feel like if we create the right win-win-win dynamic in a market that is big, and in a market where the ecosystem players are already spending billions of dollars, I think we will over the course of time accrue a right to win, and becoming a unicorn or whatever, I think is just like a side benefit of that.
Mm. I wonder when it comes to recruiting like the team. I think you obviously done such a great job like recruiting a lot of people from the famous firms like a Honey, like you used to work at like Google and Affirm, and like I wonder when it comes to like putting together the team, how do you think about from like the 0 to 1 stage to now, since you guys are fast growing and then like you recently just raised funding, where would you kind of like allocate the dollar to help the company grow?
Yeah, so with the team, we're fortunate that we were able to get a really strong team in place like from the get go, and we've actually kind of stayed almost the same size for the last 2 years. I think like 2 years ago when we announced our seed, we were 11. Now we're like 15, 14. And for us, a lot of it really has been if you hire like highly motivated people who don't necessarily, I mean, in our case, we also had the combination of like highly motivated people who are really smart and who also have industry expertise. I don't think that third piece is like critical, but like just having that combination, and like people who are just willing to get stuff done, who don't care that much about things like titles or like hierarchy or politics, you just find that you get stuff done. So we've been very fortunate to like recruit a team that is very mission aligned with us and that is willing to like grind through like the good times and the bad times to make sure that Kudos works well for our customers. And I think for us, culture matters a lot too, in that like we hire slowly and deliberately, because I believe that the first set of hires that you have in a company ultimately lay the foundation for how the rest of your company scales. And we've seen progressively that the more we hire, the more that DNA that has already been set by the first couple of people continues to like expand. And there was the second part of your question was how are we going to use the dollars to grow? So I think like in the like pre-ZERP era, like raising money meant we're going to go 10x the team. I think for us, a lot of what we think about right now is for every new person that we hire, we like to hire when we actually feel an actual pain. Like, so like I've worked almost every job at this company, and that at some point it's like, oh, it's clear that hiring someone else can actually help me 10x the impact I can have in this role. And we have a similar lens as we expand the team. Like our goal with the funding is not necessarily to expand the team, but it gives us the optionality to hire more people as the need is created. I would say the bigger thing that matters to us with the funding is that it gives us a little bit more leeway to accelerate our ambitions in terms of how we execute and like the types of features that we want to launch. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be launching a lot of smarter, more AI powered features that like lean into your historical spend to give you better and richer insights. And for us, it's just really, we are able to accelerate our ability to deliver more value for our consumers. And one way we will do that over time is like, as need arises, we will hire people, but it's not really like the primary goal of the capital that we've raised.
You mentioned about like the AI features. Can you chat a little bit more about that? Like, how would you, first of all, how do you think of like AI could add value into your firm and then into your company? And then we chat about like, you want to build like you want to really build up on like the personalization part of the business. Like, what does the future of personalization mean? Because right now, like for example, when I go on like Bank of America, I would be able to see, okay, so I have spent like 40% of money in food, or like 60% rent or something. Like, what would be personalization look like for you for in the next, like, let's say, call it like a 5 years?
Yeah, so I think for me, if you're talking on a 5-year horizon, it's basically saying that by leveraging the information we know about you That's like your purchase intent, like the historical purchases you've made, the goals and intentions that you've expressed to Kudos, things like the cars that you already have in your wallet, places you've already shopped at, that we're going to be able to give you very clear, personalized insights on things that you can do that better help you get to your goals. And now different consumers have different goals. So like if you were talking about a consumer who is like a high FICO, high spend consumer who does not revolve debt on their credit cards and is trying to like save up points towards a trip to Bali, like you want to fly business class to Bali for free. What that would mean for us is we will figure out what are the most optimal ways for you to actually achieve that goal. Like, so if you're spending a lot in certain stores where we have, like you have a card, for instance, that would give you more points, we would like help recommend that to you. If they're based on your spend patterns, there are credit cards that maybe can help you unlock more like points. Recommend that to you. If they're little, like, but for us, again, it's really about like just giving you that personalized insight on like on the merchant front, where to shop next and how to actually unlock more value from the spend when you shop in that place. In the context of when you're shopping today, we show you, again, personalized recommendations on like how your credit card can help you unlock more earnings and how brands and their personalized offers can help you make a purchase cheaper. And then you have like consumers who are like a little bit more nuanced, like where maybe they revolve credit. And for them, maybe the be all end all is not earning rewards. It's like, how do I not pay more APRs? And so there are things like we don't support today, but there are things that we would want to support over the course of time, like showing you, hey, you're about to make this purchase at Sephora. And yes, you could earn Kudos Boost. But the thing that actually matters more is that you're spending on a card where you already have $20,000 in revolving debt, and that card has 25% APR. Maybe spend on another card where you have like 2% APR, or maybe, I mean, there's no card with 2% APR, but that's a very hypothetical case. Or maybe use buy now, pay later, because based on how we understand your income, you would be able to pay this over the next 6 weeks on a like 4 pay in 4 plan in a way that does not accrue APRs for you. So again, there's a little bit more nuance that we can unlock for the consumer, but like today, a lot of it is really around like high FICO, high spend, non-revolver, helping them figure out better ways to earn with their spend. But more holistically, we want to be a wallet that works for every kind of consumer, including the consumer who revolves and the consumer who's trying to like earn more rewards, or the consumer who's trying to like earn more towards their trip to Bali.
Totally. I wonder, let's say, like, since like I feel like if I'm a person that, can you explain more about like, let's say, for example, like right now we are all like, I'm so sorry. My brain just like literally died. Like, so I like my question was kind of like, for example, like a PayPal right now, since like let's say like if I'm like a user that link every card onto PayPal, and how do you get them to like integrate into like Kudos? So like I mean like just like how do you think about like the competitive landscape in general?
Got it. So you're saying for if you're a PayPal user, how do we get you to care about Kudos?
Yes. So like I know that like so yeah.
Yeah. So I think, again, a lot of it really comes down to the value, like being very clear about the consumer value we deliver. PayPal is a great wallet that's been around for 20 years. And the primary thing that PayPal does, at least in the checkout wallet context, is helping you pay faster on the 70% of stores that are integrated with PayPal. The thing that Kudos does very uniquely, and the super early stages of, in terms of like our ambition, is that we don't just help you pay faster. We think paying faster is like a table stakes thing that should happen, which is why we just work by default across every store you shop, not just integrated stores. And I think for us, a lot of it really comes down into like leaning into the next layer of value. We think of Kudos as like, we think of PayPal like as like digital wallet like 1.0, and like the whole suite of other wallets like Google Pay, Apple Pay is like 1.5, and Kudos is kind of like 2.0, where 1.0 was just like pay faster, and like 1.5 added a few more smarter like security forward features, and
Mhm.
we're a little bit more natively integrated into certain devices and products. And with Wallet 2.0, it's really less about the payment and more about the consumer value. So a lot of what we do everywhere in like our marketing and in our product is highlighting how you can unlock more earnings and savings automatically by like having a Kudos wallet. And we kind of build this progressive trust with a consumer, in that like we're a wallet that a lot of people don't know about. So like, do you want to put all your credit card numbers into Kudos? Maybe not initially, but what we do is like when you onboard to Kudos, you tell us the cards that you have, and you don't have to put your numbers in, and you plug in the browser extension and you set up the app. And whenever you get to checkout, we automatically start to deliver value by showing you, oh, here's how much you can earn from this card. Here's purchase protection. Here's extended warranty. And we find that over time, like over the course of 2-3 weeks, people actually end up fully setting up their wallet because they actually start to see that value that Kudos brings that no other wallet that they've ever worked with brings to them. So again, everything for me really comes back to, can you clearly communicate the incremental value that is delivered to the consumer? And is that value really a 10x value over the existing products? And how quickly can you work to continue to expand that value proposition? And I think for us, we're very well positioned across all buckets in that there's very clear consumer value. We are delivering a lot of that value today in terms of like unlocking more earnings with spend. And our team is moving extremely fast to like accelerate our path towards what we call self-driving money, which is just having a wallet that automatically works for you so you don't have to think about money.
I really like the term self-driving money. So I guess like to piggyback on like my earlier question, I think one other thing I thought about is like, since PayPal has like such a big like market share, it's like 76 or like 79% of like the, I guess, like the checkout related things. I wonder what if like they just started making their like in-house kudos. So like how do you kind of like um think about if they're making a similar product themselves? And I wonder like what would be the, like, I guess if there's any way that like, for, since like I know that you guys are more towards like focusing on the rewarding and then focusing on like which card to pick. I think that's a really unique value proposition. I'm just curious about like, because of like, people, I think money is something that people are hardly trying to kind of like switch. I feel like even for me to like adapting onto like Apple Pay, it was like after a while, even like I've been an iPhone user since like, I don't know, 10 years ago. So like I feel like for people to switch how they build like a behavior on top of like a existing top name brand, it's like very hard, right? Like, so think about like, let's say like a Google and OpenAI, like, Google search, like no one have like ever thought about like rivaling them essentially. But right now, like we have like a OpenAI situation, which is like people instead of search, people like type in something into ChatGPT, right? So I guess like, how do you think about like your company would kind of like rival something that's like so deeply integrated into people's heart about like how they typically spend money or pay? Because a lot of people may like having building trust on top of like a different brand, especially credit card integration, it's like a different level instead of like a Rakuten, which is like a more of lightweight kind of situation.
Yeah, that's a great question, and not to compare us to OpenAI, but since you brought that example up, I think it's an interesting example because, like, what you saw there is existing behavior and that people ask questions, and today Google gives you 10 links as an answer,
Mhm.
including a lot of ads. And OpenAI came and said, "Hey, we're a new company, and you can ask us questions, and we're going to give you the answer." For Google, I mean, the reason why Google has probably not reacted even though it's like the number one priority for the organization, is that their business model implications. There are a lot of like slow moving parts within a company that large. I worked at Google for like about 4 years. So I think with the bigger companies, when it comes to paradigm shift,
Mhm.
even though it is top of mind for them, they just generally are slower to move because there are also a lot of legacy implications. There are implications around like, how do we rethink our overall like business strategy? Like, PayPal is an integrated wallet. Does PayPal really want to, like, what does it mean for PayPal to switch from being an integrated wallet to being a non-integrated wallet that actually just shows up for the consumer wherever they shop, regardless of whether the merchant has actually put a button into their site? I feel like those things are just like harder to move. And so for us, we believe that the notion of what if a big company does this? It's always going to exist in every single industry. And the way smaller companies have always just like dealt with this David Goliath thing is just figuring out where their strengths are, which is like moving fast, delivering the core value that we continue to promise our consumers, and continue to expand on that core value. And I think it's going to take a company like PayPal a lot of time to really shift and then prioritize consumers and actually start to layer on like the increment. And to be fair to PayPal, PayPal is announcing a lot of things in the consumer realm around rewards and personalization. But I just think these things are a lot slower moving than the way a company like us can execute. And you're very right on the trust side of things, especially with credit cards. It's just like, it's a place where people have historically built relationships with larger companies. Like you're building that relationship with Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal, because you know them, you trust them. And so for us, being clear also about our security, our privacy stance. So like today we have like 256-bit encryption and all the data, and we're implementing a lot of just security and privacy measures that make sure that every single aspect of the consumer's data is safe, secure, and just protected. But then I think incremental to that, as I mentioned, like part of the way we build that trust with the consumer is in not asking for everything at the same time, but actually being like letting them progressively see why they should use Kudos before fully committing. And which is why when you onboard to Kudos, you don't have to put your card numbers. You just have to tell us what cards you have. And if 2 weeks into the journey, you actually feel like Kudos is a clear step change from your PayPal experience, where maybe I don't actually want to pay with my card in PayPal anymore. I want to pay with my cards in Kudos because Kudos works in more places. Kudos recommends the best card. Kudos delivers personalized offers. Like that for us is how we actually start to like win. And I think over time, like when you talked about that distribution growth thing, I think if we build a product that is consistently delivering value to the consumer, and if we're building a funnel that lets more consumers come in and build that trust with us, it's like this flywheel of like, you get more people in, they build trust, they tell other people, hey, I love this brand, it helped me save $100, or it helped me book my trip to Bali, or it helped me figure out how to like be less in debt with my shopping. It's just something that I think that there's ideally a flywheel for growth for us. So it is a very big and hard problem, and it is a fair question. But I think the combination of the incumbent's sluggishness to grow and evolve, which is just just a natural thing that happens with companies that are 100,000, 10,000, 100,000 people large, plus our ability to move very quickly, plus our ability to deliver value to the consumers in a very clear way, but also our ability to build experiences that let us build trust progressively with the consumer before asking them for everything is like what I think will set us apart over time.
Let's talk about I guess other companies in the competitive landscape. There is the card rewards optimization, which including the incumbents like NerdWallet, and I wonder for those different existing options, or the cashback extensions, or the merchant integrated mobile wallets. I guess when you're thinking about these different other solutions, I guess how do you think about each one, and then compared to Kudos, and when you were trying to build a moat for your company, what were the mental checklist that you have to kind of identify where you want to focus most of your energy on, which you feel like it's a fake threat, but which you feel like it's actually there's something there, we need to actually shift, basically shape our product towards a certain direction to make ourselves more competitive.
Yeah, I think something that we have really prioritized is we prioritize this whole notion of making your money work for you, unlocking more value from all your spend. Something that ended up happening as an indirect consequence of that is that we ended up with a bunch of different competitors in different verticals. I think the thing that we do very uniquely is that we bring a lot of that value together into a single product. So when you think about Honey, you're talking about coupons and rewards. when you think about NerdWallet, you're talking about like articles that help you figure out the next card and potentially some level of technology, but like they don't have like that much technological sophistication. And then you talk about like the wallets that just help you pay. I think for us, a key thing that we focused on was if we focus on the goal, which is to unlock more value from spend, it does require a little bit of the best in each of these worlds. And so that is what, like, I would say the differentiator for Kudos is that we really bring the best parts of all these products into a single smart product that automatically does the work for the consumer. And that's also another key point, the automatic piece. Because if you think about like one thing I think Honey did great versus like Retail Me Not 10 years ago was Retail Me Not, people had to go do work to find coupons. Honey was like, hey, we're just gonna like do the coupon thing for you. What we're trying to do is actually that, but across the different verticals of your personal financial life, where we want your money to actually unlock more money for you. And what that means is if you're shopping, we don't want you to have to go think about, is this the best way to buy this thing? Or is this the most advantageous way for me to make this purchase? Or is this the best place for me to purchase? We want to actually answer that question for you. We don't want you to ever think about like, do I have the right cards in my wallet, or like, are there cards that could actually be a better fit for me? We want to give you that insight. We don't want you to think about, oh, I'm paying right now and like, oh, this is the best card, but I don't know where the card is. We just want to do it for you. And so for us, the key is really semi always on, in that like we're there with you when you're shopping, and we're there with you like whenever you need us in the app or portal to give you very specific insights. And I think the consumer cares a lot less about the features and more about outcomes. And as long as we aggregate all the features under the hood that deliver that outcome, I think we put the consumer in a place where Kudos can be an all-in-one solution to more from their money.
We address about like the incumbent, but there is like other emerging tech companies like Max Reward and like Card Pointers, or I guess like Red Ventures. It seems like a really interesting company. Like, so they own the points guide. Like, that's crazy. But like, what, like, tell us more about like, since like, the bigger company may be like really hard to move fast, but what about these like more emerging people? I guess like how do you kind of like think about the competitive landscape that way?
Yeah, so with the emerging companies, like you mentioned, like Max Reward, Card Pointers, they do a great job for a very specific demographic. Like they do a great job for people who are already tracking their rewards in spreadsheets, and they give you a much smarter spreadsheet to track your rewards. The thing that we found very early on is that most people don't want to do that. Like most people don't want a smarter spreadsheet unless you were already using a spreadsheet. And if you talk about the world of people who are already using spreadsheets, it's maybe 1 million people in the country that like already use spreadsheets to correct their credit cards. Again, and those, I think for those people, Max Rewards, Card Pointers actually probably do a much better job than Kudos. Where we want to play is more in what does the average mainstream American consumer who's like who's above 25 with a high credit score, high spend, what are they willing to do? And how do we take away all the effort for them so that we are getting more value for them? So the way I think we compete with folks like Max Rewards and Card Pointers is that we just build a product that is more catered to a slightly different demographic that cares less about getting into the nitty-gritty details of the actual card rewards and just wants the convenience and like the satisfaction of something is doing this work for me, something is being predictive around how I'm going to spend and is able to like help me just unlock more dollars from my spend. And like you mentioned, Red Ventures, we actually partner with them on the credit card front and they're a great company. They own so many different brands. And like, I think where they thrive is content. So they own CNET and like the Points Guy and like just so many different brands that people don't realize. It's like this juggernaut in like South Carolina that makes $2 billion in revenue a year. But we are not necessarily competing with them in the world that they thriving, because they thrive in content, and we believe that they will continue to thrive in content. If anything, with our partnership with them, sometimes when we recommend a credit card to a member based on their personalized spend, it actually might be a good, like we would link you to go to like TPG to maybe go read more about the card, because sometimes like there's also that combination of technology plus editorial that helps people make decisions. But what we do is like we're a filtering layer for you to actually get to a place where like, oh, I understand that this problem exists. I understand that I need to get a new card. I understand that my wallet is not optimized for me and who I am and how I spend, and then go read content about it. So I don't really view Red Ventures as a competitor in that sense. I think that there are some symbiotic relationships that it could exist between like both companies.
Mm. I think that's such a really interesting business. I've like never like I feel like this is such a really interesting discovery. I wonder like when it comes to like thinking about like the company's growth, what do you think would be like, you mentioned about like the next thing would be like building the AI layer and then building more different features, right? How do you decide on like which feature to build that's gonna move the needles? And how do you quickly test it out within your community, since you mentioned like the after like the first, like let's say call it like a 10 or 12 customer, you recruited a bunch of like 5,000 customer from like the community, and do you own your own like distribution channel, aka like a Slack or like a Kudos like Discord group or something? Like how do you kind of like manage to maybe launch something small within like a smaller ecosystem that's like maybe the power user of the world?
Yeah, so the first part of that question is like how we decide what we build, and a
Yeah.
lot of it really is like the consumer. Like the consumer tells us what to build, and we actually, because we started with this mindset of like we manually recruited our first 100 customers and like we manually recruited the next 5,000 from Reddit. We still till this day talk to customers every week. Like we actually hop on actual Zoom calls with like Kudos customers, and we ask them for like, what are the challenges you have with the product? What are the things that you think that we should do better? We have like internal Slack, like every support message that comes into the company goes into an internal user feedback channel that we all look at. And that also helps inform like what are the biggest pain points and the biggest unlocks that we can like bring to our users. So that's kind of like the core of like how we decide what to build next. Obviously, there is like thinking a broader like strategic alignment of does this actually make sense for Kudos given our win-win-win ecosystem of partners. And then the second part is how do we like maintain the communities that we have and like launch things. So we're still in this mindset where we try to figure out like what is the simplest version of a solution that we can put out in the market. I wouldn't say we necessarily do a lot of like strict beta testing where we have 1,000 people that we segment to go use a product. But what we tend to do is that we try to figure out what is the simplest version of a solution to a problem that we're trying to solve that we can put out in the market to all our members and get a reaction from. And those reactions help us inform how we evolve those products and features. Like something like MariaGPT, for instance, which is our AI-powered bot. When we launched that a few months ago, it was just a simple like, ask me any questions about credit cards and I could give you answers. And something that we realized over time is we started to understand like how the kinds of questions that people were asking. Like sometimes people were asking questions that we predicted that they would ask, but a lot of times there were questions that were more broadly about like their personal finance. And so that insight has led us to a world where like now we're going to connect your offline purchases into that GPT, and it's going to be able to give you answers, not just about credit cards, but about questions that you have about your own personal finance. So for us, that's kind of how we think very iteratively on like how we first get the feedback for the consumers. We solve for the top feedback that we're getting from our customers, and then we build and launch iteratively, and we continue to evolve products that we launch for our entire audience based on the continuous feedback that we're getting. So for us, it's just that feedback loop. We do have communities, like we have a Reddit and like we post a lot on Instagram and Twitter and all that, but all that really just aggregates into the feedback loop for us as a company.
I wanted to ask the audience question. So one of the audience that have there been any observation that how people use Kudos that were surprising? If so, like love to hear it.
Yeah,
How the team reacted. That's
something that we because today Kudos primarily works with like online purchases. And we started to see a lot of people ask like using Kudos like for like just checking our cheat sheet, checking the app when they go to stores to figure out like what card should I pay with. So we're thinking a lot about like what can we do more in the in-store realm. A lot of the things I said about progressive onboarding was actually based on the learning that we had in that like a year plus ago, we actually required our members to put all their credit card. I mean, we didn't require, but it was part of our onboarding flow. And we observed that most people were just skipping that part of the onboarding flow and just setting up the extension. And so we basically just completely took away the credit card number request within the onboarding, and we made that something that we integrate post onboarding into. Like when you're checking out and like say we make a recommendation and you enter a card number, we're like, hey, do you want to like store this within Kudos? Because like we know you're paying right now, you're probably going through some manual effort. So again, it's little things, it's like tiny insights like that really help us really understand a little bit more what people care about. Like with things like the integration that we're going to do to pull offline data through Plaid, what we started to find out was that people do care about the extension, but also care about unlocking more value from all their spend. Like people have these complex credit cards. Like if you have an Amex Platinum, you have a $200 credit where you have to choose a specific airline every year. You have like a Saks Fifth Avenue credit. You have like Uber credits that like renew every month. And those things are very difficult to keep track of. And we've heard a lot of customers say, hey, this is a very complex part of my life. Can you simplify it, especially since you're trying to help me unlock more from all my spend and all my credit card spend? So that, I guess, it still feeds back into the previous question you had, which is like when we learn these things, we just feed them back into how we think about building our product roadmap.
I wonder, so I think that's great. Oh, okay. So I want to be mindful of the time. So like I will have like a one real question and 1 minute fire round for you. So a lot of the listeners are like emerging managers in the VC ecosystem or like investors in general. What would you say would be like in the fintech ecosystem that's something, or like a company or like a type of innovation that you're most excited about besides Kudos, of course? It doesn't have to be the exact what you guys are doing. It's more of like the general fintech ecosystem that you thought it was like innovative or like something people should pay attention to.
I think like something that we're doing right now, like as we integrate transaction data, something that we realize is that a lot of transaction data is very unstructured. So like you're pulling in like Plaid transactions, but it's actually hard to determine what exact merchant this transaction is coming from, like, or what category this merchant falls into. And we care about the categorization data in terms of being able to deliver the recommendations and the value to the consumer. So I realized that there are a lot of companies, like there's a company called Entropy that like cleans up the transaction data and enriches that data with like things like MCC codes, which make that data make a lot more sense to companies like Kudos. There are companies that we are working with on the like identity front, where like they simplify your ability to connect things like your credit score with like a single OTP, such that we are able to better qualify the recommendations that we make to a consumer. Because for instance, if we're recommending a financial product, it does help if we actually understand you, not just from a transaction standpoint, but from like a credit score standpoint. So there are a lot of companies that are doing like cool, innovative things in terms of actually like plugging that gap. But the thing that I learned building a consumer fintech, they say that there's this joke that most B2B companies, actually a lot of B2B fintech companies were actually B2C. I think Plaid was actually like a spend management app, and they realized that the harder problem was to like go actually get the transaction data. And it's something where like every time as we progressively build within Kudos, we just see so many of these things where we're like, oh wow, it would be great to do this for the consumer, but all the things that we need to do under the hood are so hard. And so it's great to have an ecosystem of B2B fintech partners that actually simplify a lot of that for us.
Totally. Okay, so we're at the last 1 minute fire round for you. What's your favorite book?
Shoe Dog.
Oh, I love Shoe Dog, the Nike CEO book.
Yeah, the Nike CEO. I like that book a lot. It's just like when you just kind of like,
so real.
Nike is just like a really iconic brand, but like when you like figure out how real it was, he's like flying on a flight to Japan and reading a book about how to do business in Japan, and then goes and like does a deal with Onitsuka Tiger. The way he brings it, like the way he thinks about, I think Phil Knight was the first person that actually leveraged influencer marketing in a very like new, fresh, innovative way, like for the 70s. And it's just, I feel like it's a really real book. And another book I like a lot is Hard Thing About Hard Things. Again, because it similarly goes into like the real nuance of what is hard about starting a company. Like starting Kudos is probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life, and but it's also very enjoyable. And being able to like hear perspectives from people who have actually really succeeded, but also are very transparent about like how hard it was and how building a company is not an overnight success thing.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
That is an interesting question. I would say, I mean, my family has always been supportive of me, so I think that's probably like the number one. There are entrepreneurs that I've always admired, like people like Max Levchin. I was extremely privileged to be able to like work for him at Affirm, and also he was like through Sci-Fi was one of our first checks. But something I've always admired about a person like Max is that he has lived at this intersection of fintech and commerce for like, I would say if you were thinking about a founder with like founder market fit, it's him. He like co-founded PayPal, like did Slide, and then came and co-founded Affirm. And something that I think is also very unique in the way he has built these companies is like PayPal talks about the PayPal mafia, where a lot of those people went on to go start companies, and people like Max actually supported them. And like being at Affirm and leaving Affirm and actually seeing Max support and invest in Kudos, and seeing like this Affirm quote unquote mafia started to build out, like just shows you that the thing I admire is not just his ability to really lean into the place where he has the biggest strength and like create innovations in that space, but also being able to support his team as they go out in the world and build more innovative products.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Sade Adu, the musician.
Where can we find you outside of work?
I have a Twitter and LinkedIn. I don't really say very much, but I have those accounts available.
Amazing. Well, Tikue, well, thank you so much for coming onto the show. It was such an informative and like fun episode.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Grace.
Let me quickly end the stream.